Most of the photos I make are crap. Henri Cartier-Bresson said, "Your first 10,000 photos are your worst." I'm not sure how many I've made, but if they survive the initial culling process, I'm still going back to my film archives to shred the embarrassments. Hardly any make it to what I consider the ultimate expression of the photographic process, as prints. After more than 40 years, since I turned pro anyway, I'm still quite capable of making bad photos. But I still sketch. That's what most of my photos are, preliminary sketches that may or may not result in a more fully realized work, or perhaps the realization the idea doesn't work, at least not as a photo. Maybe the idea would be better expressed in words, even though, as the old saw goes, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Sometimes words work better for what I have to say, and so maybe 1,000 photos leads me to the keyboard. As an example of a successful photograph, let me introduce Exhibit A, arguably the most successful photo I've ever made. Not my personal favorite, but also proof that when it comes to, well, if remuneration or public praise can be taken as success, then this is it. I've sold so many of these as silver prints originally, and today pigment prints, greeting cards, posters, and I've licensed it for use in magazines, for CD covers, and most recently, a book cover that came out last month. It's in private and corporate collections, in museum collections, and it regularly gets stolen and posted in Facebook groups and such, by people who get personal satisfaction, I guess, from the likes they get in return for their discovery. No attribution or credit given. I attempted to make this image over a period of months in 1986, returning to my darkroom, and every time I was disappointed with the result. Long story short, I realized I needed to get high, so to speak. And since this was the pre-drone era, and I was, in those days, a mountaineer, it was obvious I'd need to climb to the summit of this classic wooden roller coaster. So I contacted management of the Pacific National Exhibition, and after they consulted with their lawyers, a release form was drawn up so that if I made an unplanned dive into the dirt of Playland, as this part of the PNE is called, it wasn't going to be their problem. This is incidentally the 65th anniversary of the roller coaster's construction. It was built in 1958 from hardy first-growth Douglas fir, and much of that original timber is still supporting its hair-raising climbs and drops. It was 28 years old when I climbed it, and I was 34. It was already weathered silvery gray, almost like petrified wood, kind of like I am now. Anyway, my point is that besides the fact that a photographer can never really know what kind of reception individual photos will receive once they're out in the world, you can dedicate your resources with the intention, the belief that the result will be the best photo you can make. And when I made the roller coaster photo, I'd already turned my former hobby into a career. It was paying the rent. Well, most months. I think I've explained here, or did I just consider explaining it here? Anyway, at that time, I was also selling beauty supplies, entered in the ledgers under the shampoo trail. And the $400 rent was, at that time, split between my girlfriend and I, since our two roommates had recently moved back to Toronto. This photo was completely self-assigned, shot in between a very busy schedule that month, producing boring but technically difficult images for an electrical supply catalog. And anyone who's shot mirror-like polished surfaces will know what I mean. A light tent is absolutely essential. As well as fashion ads, entertainers, headshots. That was my main work then. I made this photo to add to a scheduled show of my personal work. As my journals remind me, besides the fact that money was tight, I maintained a manic schedule. Impossible for me to match today for sure. So nearly 40 years later, that just means that I have to be more discerning, and it helps that these days Night clubbing isn't part of my schedule. I'm not saying you have to be making a living from your photography, a pro in that sense, or selling shampoo and perms on the side. What I hope to get across is that it might help to approach photo making, or any creative endeavor for that matter, as if it were a career. I do think that any successful artist, that's a term laden with so much baggage I tend to avoid it, so let's just say craftsperson, anyone who excels in their craft, I think, tends to be just a bit obsessive. I know that even today, my work takes up the greatest part of my days and nights. Like, I'm often awake at 3 a.m. planning my next photo or YouTube video, even in my dreams. And yes, I have to say many do remain there in dreamland, for better or worse. So the title of this video is a little bit clickbait. It should be titled, How to Be the Best Photographer You Can Be. Because you can't be anyone else. Which leads to the whole idea of influence. Now, back in 1986, and in fact, right from the time I decided, although I'm not so sure it was a decision as much as a kind of slow evolution. Anyway, when it became clear that I wanted to make photography more than just a hobby, I was influenced or inspired by a number of photographers, from David Bailey to Eugene Atgay, and I'll quote something Bailey said here. Like a lot of things Bailey says, and some of them not repeatable here if I want to stay within YouTube's ad-friendly guidelines, this one may seem deliberately obscure, but it went something like, don't copy other photographers' ideas, steal them. Now, I may well be entirely misinterpreting what he meant, but here's how I understand it. If you copy, well, that's just imitation, and you can never be that photographer. And this goes for YouTube too. You're not Peter McKinnon, so stop it. Or whether it comes to any other creative project. Now, if you steal an idea and really make it your own, see the difference? There really is nothing new under the sun. Bailey took the cameras available at the time. He took a job at an established magazine, admittedly with brilliant photo editors, the best of the day, and he helped create the whole look of the 60s by breaking rules and bringing his distinctive vision to bear, along with his friends, which included the Beatles and the Stones. Something else he certainly brought with him: he knew his film and chemicals. He knew the effects he could create with different combinations. He was a hands-on experimenter. Now, here I'm going to have to insert one of my pet rants. Sorry. Skip ahead if you've heard it before. People who repeat endlessly, there are channels, it seems, where the underlying or overt theme of every single video is that technical matters don't matter. To paraphrase Bailey's old friend Brian Duffy, bullshit. I hope that's ad-friendly. Now, I've tackled this conceit in greater detail, much greater detail. But I saw it infecting art school curricula starting in the 80s. And those schools turned out scores of pseudo-artiste types who went on to promulgate this idea as college instructors and now YouTube opinionators. And there seems to be quite an appetite for this idea that perhaps success comes with the adoption of the correct philosophical approach. Well, here I'm a counter-opinionator, if you will, in this case. And if I sound like a broken record, well, so be it. So I definitely do believe that a grounding in the history of photography is really helpful. And clearly, technique without heart and soul, without something worthwhile to say, is likely to be shallow or even empty. And I've admitted from the beginning of this video, my photos are mostly failures. There are obviously great images, photos of historic importance that are anything but technically perfect. Lots of examples. And I've also discussed in passing the Japanese idea of wabi-sabi that emphasizes the value of simplicity, imperfection, and transience. And I still maintain that a good craftsman knows his tools and materials and manipulates them expertly, with a pretty good idea as to the outcome. Certainly, this skill is not optional if you hope to go commercial. But from there, serendipity and freedom can follow, particularly like in street photography. Technology is the mother of art, says photographer Simon Diaz, and maybe it follows that technology is the father, or maybe godfather, since it often makes an offer that you can't refuse. Well, you could, and make photograms or rayographs, to use the term coined by Man Ray, but you'd still need paper and chemicals, or if you prefer the modern version, a scanner. Isn't it interesting that wabi-sabi exists alongside the kind of austere and uncluttered vision we see in, for instance, Japanese architecture, gardening, ikebana, and bonsai design. I've probably said this before as well, but it's something that makes sense to me. Ansel Adams, who was also a pianist, drew the comparison between making music and making photos. He likened the film, the negative, to the musical score, the print to the final interpretation, the music itself. How is it possible to write music without some kind of training? How is it possible to play music without dedicating yourself to mastering the instrument? You can have as many ideas, stolen or otherwise, and all the passion in the world, but if you're just bashing the ivories or pressing the shutter button with passion or hope, but then chance really is the only thing that you have to rely on. I prefer, and I think it's more reliable, intent in whatever skill that I've developed over the decades. It may not have brought me wealth or fame, but whatever rewards, I think they're honest for the most part. And honesty, that's the core prerequisite. Honesty first to yourself, and true interest. You can't copy someone else's interest. True passion, I think that's the thing that'll sustain your work. That's the thing that'll show through in your work. That'll sing, if you will, and shine and resonate with the people that presumably you're making your photos to reach. But, and this is the most important, your photos should reach their perfection in your mind. I don't mean like a hero in his own mind delusion. Again, honest self-assessment is really important, and that can be tough. But in your heart, aren't you ultimately making photographs for you? If not you, then who? Yeah, I know clients if you're taking commissions, but I believe, and I may be wrong, that an hour's time spent familiarizing yourself with a new feature of your camera or other gear or software, something practical that you can then bring to bear on your next project, your next idea, that's better spent there than with any nebulous philosophy. What do you think? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Anti-gear gurus rarely offer practical advice, just some kind of inference that by, I don't know, chanting their names you might become the next Richard Avedon or Walker Evans. Isn't that something like appropriation in search of acceptance? Again, how can that be satisfying? No, sorry to say, the harder path is to becoming you. See where that takes your photography, but really, no amount of outside reinforcement, accolades, awards, publications, client satisfaction even, not to mention social media likes, get off that treadmill, can maintain the passion for photography or any endeavor really. Without that inner satisfaction that comes from the very act of creation itself. From the very first time I saw the magic of the image emerging in the developer tray, to the amazing things we can do with digital photography today, the incredible technologies built in today's cameras, I'm still reaching to be the best photographer I can be, which is not a destination as much as a journey. Happy trails. That's what I think. I hope you found this video informative and thought-provoking. I'd be interested to know if you agree with my approach. Let me know what you think in the comments again. Oh, and what did you think of the audio, besides the reverb from the 18-foot ceilings here? Some new gear I'm trying out that I'll feature in another video coming soon. But if you did enjoy this chat, please do give it the old thumbs up. And if this is your first time here, please do consider subscribing. We'd love to see you again. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. In the meantime, take care. Cheers. We'll see you later.